Today we'll be discussing the movie The Substance, and we'll be discussing Botox. This is Doctor versus Comedian. I'm Dr. Asif Doja, and this is the Doctor of Laughs.
Not the real doctor.
Ali Hassan. Every episode I pick a topic for Ali from comedy and entertainment, and I question him about it. Then Ali picks a topic for medicine and health and grills me on that topic. Today we'll be discussing the Oscar-nominated movie The Substance, and then we'll be discussing Botox. Now, Ali, it's because both these movies deal a lot with appearance, physical appearance, and the superficiality of beauty. I mean, I guess that's what Botox is all about. We'll talk about a lot of the medical uses of Botox, but, you know, a lot of people use it for cosmetic reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you want to admit to us right now or no?
Nothing I need to admit so far. I will admit this. There are times I have been sleeping on one side a lot and I think squishing my face.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I get this like under one eye, this deep line that lasts till like, I don't know, 5 p.m. And I'm like, maybe if there was just some product I could have just inject into underneath my eye, if there was just something.
Well,
would really
listen,
help.
We'll talk about it with the good old Botox in our second half. But first half, we're going to be talking about The Substance. Let's get going. So I want to ask about this movie, The Substance. Came out in the fall of 2024. I remember seeing it on an ad when I was scrolling through the internet, like Instagram or Reddit. It kind of came up, and I think you wanted to talk a bit about the streaming service that picked it up. A lot of movie companies did not really want to be involved in this movie, and we'll get into why. It has to do with the topic. So it's on Mubi.
Yeah. And every time I say Mubi in the house, there's somebody there to go, do you mean Tubi? No, I mean Mubi. That's why I said Mubi.
Are you saying movie?
No, yeah, exactly. Anyway, it's M-U-B-I, which is the exact same spelling as T-U-B-I, but this is a paid service.
With an M.
With an M. I'm going to kill you. It's got, I leave my family so that I don't have to have these conversations. Cool. All right. Mubi is, what it is essentially is a way for me to not pay Amazon another penny. That's important.
Mm-hmm.
That's muy importante para mí.
Right.
Maybe por mí. I don't know my prepositions as well as I should.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, I will be paying them in a month if I don't quickly unsubscribe from this. So I still have a lot of exploring to do, but it's interesting documentaries and very different films.
Mm-hmm.
For a free month, definitely worth it,
Okay.
especially if you have like a down month where you're not, but let's say if you're going to be on the road, you're going to have a lot of time to yourself, or you're going to have time where you can watch different things and it's not too busy a time. I would say worth looking into.
So this movie, The Substance.
You mean Mubi?
Oh my God.
I'm going to kill myself.
This is going to be an ongoing unfunny joke.
Unfunny.
By the way, I did get some good feedback about our inane conversation about a backslash versus forward slash. The comment was, don't do that again. No, just joking. Okay, sorry. Getting back to this, it's classified, this movie, as a body horror.
Yeah. So are you familiar with that genre as a term already? That's what this falls under, body horror.
I know about the body horror genre mainly because of the great Canadian filmmaker David Cronenberg.
Cronenberg, sure. Very interesting pronunciation of the word genre.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to France for a month in the spring, and this
France isn't ready. France ain't ready.
I'm not ready. So, yeah, I mean, I think probably I had kind of seen some of his early stuff, like Scanners and stuff like that, when people would rent that movie when I was a kid. But then it was The Fly, right? And The Fly is,
oh yeah, quintessential.
Yeah, this movie, by the way, if you remember the ending of The Fly, picture that kind of happening in this movie. And we're going to have to get into spoilers for this movie to talk a bit about it. But if you like the ending of The Fly and what happens in that movie, then you like this. If you were turned off by that, then you may not really be that into this movie, The Substance. So I remember The Fly. Crash was a very kind of like crazy movie that he made.
I love Crash, man, yeah.
And Existence, there was these people plugging in with these weird biotechnological things that would go into their bodies. And, then he made some other movies that were less body horror focused, but that's basically what it is. So it's horror with a lot of again, involving people's bodies. There's a lot of birth symbolism in a lot of these body horror movies, which certainly comes into this one as well, The Substance.
Yeah.
We talked about a movie from last year. It was one of my favorite movies from last year, Love Lies Bleeding. And that one it's a crime kind of thriller. I talked about it before. It takes place in the world of bodybuilding, but then there is this right turn into some body horror. So you have to be okay with that. A lot of people just feel a visceral reaction to that, and then they turn off a movie, literally visceral, because you're seeing organs, you're seeing all these things.
Sure. Well, the description is it's a subgenre of horror or horror fiction that intentionally showcases grotesque or psychologically disturbing violations of the human body or of another creature. These violations may manifest through aberrant sex. That's not abhorrent. That's aberrant.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Out. Yes.
Yeah. Off label.
Aberrations. Yeah. Mutations, mutilations, zombification, gratuitous violence, disease, or unnatural movements of the body. So I had to read that out if you're thinking, yeah, I'm cool with that. First, hear that before you apply, And by the way, one of the first examples in film is something called the Quatermass experience.
I never heard of that.
You heard of that? Okay, that's 1955. But one of the first examples of body horror in writing is what?
Frankenstein?
You got it, buddy.
Yeah,
Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, 1818.
Interesting. Yeah.
Good for you.
It's not my favorite thing, but I don't avoid it. I actually prefer that kind of horror to regular kind of jump scare horror. And goriness for the sake of goriness, I don't really love. Body horror I find sort of interesting, though. Like I said, I don't love it. So, and it's interesting that this director, so it was directed by this woman, Coralie Fargeat. And she's a French filmmaker who made a movie a couple of years ago called Revenge. I never saw it. I just read about it. It's about a woman who gets assaulted. She's in a relationship. She gets assaulted by her partner's friends, and then she enacts revenge on them, violent revenge on them. So it's this revenge movie. That's why it's called Revenge. Never saw it. Lots of critical acclaim. People said this is a next, hot director. So much so that she was offered to direct Black Widow, the Marvel movie. And she turned it down because she didn't want to do a studio film because it was very important for her to get final cut on a movie, which means she gets the final edit. And so the movie that comes out is what she wants, no studio notes.
Mm-hmm.
So she, I guess, wanted to make a movie about aging in Hollywood, this idea of the superficiality of focusing on people's looks. And so she came up with this idea of doing this in a body horror genre movie. Again, genre. Not saying it well. So
you might get your French visa taken away before it's even sent to you. Yeah.
So the plot of this movie, again, we'll just explain it briefly, is there's a actress played by Demi Moore who is named Elizabeth Sparkle. And she was a famous actress, won an Academy Award, and she's kind of in a bit of a decline of her career, and she turns 50 when the movie starts. And she hosts a aerobics video. So it's, again, kind of playing a bit on Jane Fonda. Remember Jane Fonda was like this critically acclaimed actress, activist.
It's very much because of the videos, it's playing on Jane Fonda, but it's also playing on Demi Moore to a significant degree as well. The irony of Demi Moore actually being 62 did not escape me either.
I know, and she certainly doesn't look 62, I don't think, in this movie, but she eventually loses this job as being an aerobics video instructor because she's too old, and then she looks into ways to become younger, and that's when she acquires this substance. Hence the name of the movie. And then what happens after that? Probably we'll leave any further descriptions for later, but that's basically what happens. Demi Moore, I thought, was excellent in this. I think she's going to win the Oscar for this performance. I thought it was so good. What do you think?
Watching this is a very director-heavy movie. When you're watching somebody, what I mean by that is, just to give you a small example, if somebody's laughing, this is a director who's going to do an above-the-head shot. That takes a lot more work. organizing and above the headshot. And the laugh is going to be like when they look up, and it's going to be their mouth, and it's going to be slightly slow motion. There's that type of effect on so much in this film that you almost start to wonder, how important is the actor? Is the director not more important? And in fact, in some of the interviews, she does focus a little less on the actor and a little more on the shot. The shot is very important. And you see that.
That is so interesting. Yeah, because I read an interview with Demi Moore where she says, she's talking about Coralie. She's saying Coralie finds that the actor is not that important. It's not where she's focused. And Demi Moore says this isn't good or bad. It's just different than what she's used to.
Right.
I think the implication is it's bad, but anyway.
It is, exactly. Of course it's bad. I mean, but despite all that, how brave and kind of relentless Demi Moore has to be in this movie. I totally give her full respect, because she pierces through the fact that this is a director-heavy movie. She's still truly incredible. And then you read about how many takes certain scenes had to take, because Coralie's a very demanding director, needs things very perfect. And I think Coralie, I mean, you read that, like, she wants final cut. That's a director's right to have that. You want the final edit on your movie. She struggled with the original. Was it Universal?
Yes, I think so. With the original producers,
yeah. So Universal made this movie, but then chose not to release it. So she kind of got like a little bit of a freebie there. But there was also some headbutting. So she's what you would call a visionary director. Some people might also probably say a little bit difficult to work with. But I think if she lines up with actors who see her vision, like Demi Moore seems to have, I think you can get an incredibly interesting result, which is what I feel about this movie.
Yeah, I want to touch on some of those things in a second. Getting back to Demi Moore, Coralie Fargeat wanted an actress who had been at the heart of, the star system in Hollywood, right? And so Demi Moore apparently was not her first choice. Again, like the fact that this comes out in interviews, usually people don't say that out loud, but it's interesting. Yeah. And so lots of other people.
This is the French honesty that you should prepare yourself for, Asif.
That's right. So I guess lots of other actresses declined. And then I guess Coralie didn't think that Demi Moore would be interested, but she was sent the script, and Demi Moore, when she read the script, didn't actually know if it was going to be a success or a disaster. And she said she actually didn't know until she went to the premiere of the movie, and then, which I believe premiered at the Cannes Film Festival last year. And then it was a big success. She's like, okay, this worked. Like, she honestly didn't know. So it was definitely a risk for Demi Moore, but I think she was saying that she just wanted to try this and do something different. Because, again, there are parallels to her life, right? She had to fight for recognition in Hollywood. She had to fight to be paid the same as male co-stars. At one point, she was the highest paid female actress ever, but she had to do a lot of fighting for it, a lot of objectification of her. So she had to do that. I remember the whole thing when she has the naked picture and she was on the cover, she was pregnant. She was on the cover of magazines and stuff. So there were a lot of things that she had to do. And then, of course, a lot of people that hear about this movie like, Demi Moore, what was the last movie she was in? Like, isn't she over the hill? So you can definitely see why this is a good fit for her, at least from that point of view. The other actors in it are also great. There's Margaret Qualley, who's in it. Do you know, Ali has been a trivia, do you know whose daughter that is?
Margaret Qualley, I do not.
She is the daughter of Andy McDowell, who was in a movie with Demi Moore back in the day.
What were they in together?
St. Elmo's Fire.
Oh, good movie.
I
actually forgot that, St. Elmo's Fire. I forgot that Demi Moore was in that, if you can believe that. Good Lord. Sorry, Demi.
And Margaret Qualley dating Jack Antonoff, or they may be married now. I'm not sure. I think they're married. Him, famous songwriter, writes for Taylor Swift, part of the band Fun. So, and then Dennis Quaid is in it, who is just, his scenes.
What a wonderful, despicable pig of a human being.
Yeah, his character. Not Dennis Quaid. Character. Dennis Quaid seems like a nice guy, but
I don't know about any of that.
So there is a bit of a spoiler for a scene earlier in the movie where Dennis Quaid is meeting with Demi Moore's character and is eating a bunch of shrimp. What do you think of this shrimp scene, Ali?
I'm off shrimp for a couple of weeks, is what I think.
I actually felt hungry.
Did you really?
Oh my God.
We were just so in his mouth. We were in his mouth, in his face as he ate it. It was very intimate. And so I needed to step back from shrimp for a bit. That's how I felt about that.
Anyway, you have to see the scene to believe it, but apparently 2 kilograms of shrimp were consumed during that one scene.
That's too much. Oh, God.
Getting back to how the movie was made, it is interesting, as Ali said. It's a very non-dialogue heavy movie. That's kind of seems like an awkward way to describe it. Right? There's very little dialogue in the movie. Some of the scenes with Dennis Quaid's character and Demi Moore, and some of the scenes at the end, but a lot of it is just observing what's going on. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting. And I guess the post-production of the movie was more difficult because of that, to try and piece the scenes together in a coherent way. So the editing was very important. And it was only finished, final cut was done 3 days before the premiere, if you can believe it. So they were working on it all the way up to that. The other interesting thing about this movie, and again, at first, it's like, okay, you know, she gets this substance to inject in herself, but how she injects it, what happens afterwards, and kind of the body horror, was all done 70 to 80% with prosthetic effects and very few digital effects. There's a few digital effects at the end, which you'll see when you guys get to the end of the movie. But she, being Coralie, felt that this was crucial for the theme of violence and the violence we inflict upon ourselves, right? This is a comment, this movie is a comment on plastic surgery a lot, the violence that people, especially women, inflict on themselves. For what purpose? For this beautification. And so there are some great interviews with Pierre-Olivier Person, who is the special effects head on this movie, and the lead makeup artist, Stephanie Guillon. And there is one scene in this movie, again, you can read all about the transformation that happens with Demi Moore's character using the prosthetics and things like that. But there's one scene that doesn't involve any prosthetics, which anyone who's seen this movie knows the scene I'm talking about with Demi Moore. It's the scene that will win her an Oscar, in my opinion, where she's supposed to go on a date and she puts makeup on, and I'm spoiling the scene for you a bit. She puts makeup on, then something's imperfect and she rubs it off, and she keeps doing this. And I won't ruin what happens afterwards, but she keeps doing this several times. And it's several minutes of this in the movie. It is a great scene, and it encompasses so much, I'm sure, about what women feel, what society puts on them. This scene is called the emotional heart of the movie. So it had to be perfect. And so, but if you read the interviews with the makeup artist, she eventually said after the 11th take on one day, she's like, you have to stop doing this. She told the director, you need to stop filming this because it's going to destroy the skin on Demi Moore's face if she keeps doing this.
Yeah.
And so I do think, like, when you hear that story and some of the other stuff, I think there was some conflict on this movie. If you read between the lines, same thing, the special effects guy Person, he thought they were moving too quickly into some of the grotesque body horror that happens towards the end of the movie, and he's like, you have to do this subtle changes over time to really get the effect. And again, once you guys see the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. So it's interesting, and I think some of these conflicts, again, I'm reading it between the lines a bit, but I think part of this may be just a director who has a clear vision. And out of every movie I've seen this year, this director has a vision. This is it. Ali, there's a lot of stuff in this movie the camera angles objectify women, right? Like, that's what they're doing. They're focusing on their body parts, and you think, what are you doing? This is what a male director would do, like focus on their body parts, but then you realize, oh, this is the point of the movie, right? She's trying to do these scenes in the way that a director would be objectifying women, right? Yeah. A male director, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your earlier point, there's a Variety article that is entitled "The Brains Behind the Substance, How Coralie Fargeat Stayed True to Her Gutsy Vision, Everyone wanted me to make it less violent, less excessive." So therein lies the whole point of her film, excess. I want to shine a spotlight, I was going to say not glorify, but shine a spotlight on the excess of Hollywood and the excess of this industry in particular as an offshoot from Hollywood.
When you realize that a lot of these, again, excessive things make sense. The shots, the objectification, and then the horror at the end. Just as an example, again, hopefully this isn't a spoiler, they used 21,000 liters of blood at the end of the movie. So, yeah, there's quite a bit of blood at the end. Again, how that happens, you guys can see for yourself. So, again, it's a bit of a warning, I guess, in the end. it's not for everybody, this movie. And especially, I think there may be a disconnect between some of the themes that the director's trying to get across, which is, again, how Hollywood has treated women over the years, how we do things to our own bodies and for the sake of beauty. So you might want to see a movie that is a very feminist movie in concept, but some of the things you may not really like, if the body horror towards the end.
Yeah, I think two things to note. There's some body horror stuff that I've really enjoyed. Get Out, for example, falls under body horror.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Get Out was
amazing.
A masterpiece for me. So you could be interested in this, but yeah, I hopefully we've given you a description of what this movie is about. The blood also 220 minutes. I stopped it at 45 at one point, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm halfway done. And I was like, oh, God, I'm a third of the way done. So it's a lengthier movie. I think if you're willing to go along with a director and what their vision is. I spoke on this podcast about a movie called La Cocina. It reminded me of La Cocina as I was watching this. Just excess. Again, this was a send-up. The way this movie is a send-up of Hollywood's ageism and sexism. That was a send-up of the excesses of the restaurant culture and the restaurant world and those industrial kitchens that work to get every single plate out. Everything has to be perfect, all that kind of stuff. And it was insane. And it ended in the most insane way. And that was the movie that was like the bear on cocaine with a Red Bull shooter. I don't know if you remember me talking about that.
Yeah.
So this had those type of vibes. So you just sort of have to be willing to be like, all right, let this director take me wherever. Let me understand what they're trying to do, basic, and go on a journey. But if you can get into that, I would recommend this movie.
I didn't feel the length of the movie. I thought it was well paced. I will have several comments in a couple of weeks as a preview for our Oscars preview show. So preview for a preview in a couple of weeks, because I do have a lot of thoughts about a lot of movies I saw this year about, are they too long? Are they too short? But I thought this one, I think the running time was appropriate. But again, you can judge for yourselves if you choose to see this. Before we end this section, I want to just tell you about the accolades that this movie has gotten. So Demi Moore won the Golden Globe for acting. This movie won Best Screenplay at the Cannes Film Festival this May of 2024.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And it is the most successful movie that Mubi has ever made, obviously, because I'm sure most people have never heard of Mubi until Ali mentioned it at the beginning of this podcast. This film has grossed $77 million on a $17.5 million budget. That's a hit. And so I think very curious to see where Coralie as a director goes next. I think she will get carte blanche to make whatever film she wants next and a lot of money for it. I think Demi Moore is going to have a career resurgence. Personally, I think we'll see how it does in the Oscars, but I would suggest people check it out if they feel comfortable.
Okay, so we're on this subject of Hollywood ageism and sexism. Botox is only one or two conversations away from that. What's crazy is that we haven't talked about Botox yet.
Yeah.
Coming up to our 200th episode.
Yeah.
And we have not
talked
about Botox. That's crazy because we are going to talk about how pervasive it is in society. And I've only really learned this in the last 5 years through some of the, my kids are in various sports, and some of the sports moms talk very openly about the Botox that they get. Some of them talk about it with a little bit of regret, where they're like, now I'm in, I can't stop now.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah.
And some of them talk about a bit sheepishly and only mention it because some of the other ladies are talking about it. So, and then, as I say, I'm mentioning ladies. Let's talk about the connection of it to men as well. So let's start with what Botox is, what it involves. What is it used for? Because as you mentioned, it's not just cosmetic, but that's what we generally speak about it.
Yeah, there's lots of medical uses. Yeah. And so,
outside of the medical world. Yeah. What are the side effects of it? What you should know before going in? And maybe we talk about the cost of Botox as well.
Yeah, for sure. So Botox is a toxin. So it's botulinum toxin. Okay. That comes from the Clostridium botulinum bacteria. And that's what people have heard before Botox became famous. botulism is something, right? Botulism.
It's certainly something, and what it is something that you don't associate with injecting into your body.
Exactly. So this bacteria is actually present in a lot of things. It's present in like the ground, in soil. It's in the intestinal tracts of various mammals and fish, and so it's present in nature. The bacteria itself is not, necessarily that concerning, and it does release these spores, and the spores are harmless in general. But some conditions can arise where the spores will transform and the cell population of this bacteria increases exponentially. And then at some point, they can produce this botulinum toxin, which is extremely deadly. And so you have to be extremely careful about this. And so sometimes the spores, when we see it in medicine, sometimes the spores get into honey. We've seen that before in babies, and that's why we recommend babies don't receive honey. If there's some botulinum spores in there, and then they ingest that, you're getting a lot of spores in a relatively small infant. That could be dangerous. Sometimes that's why people will say if you have canned goods and you see like the canned goods are kind of like the can is expanding a little bit, it means there's something in there that is growing, essentially, and is usually bacteria, and it can often be Clostridium botulinum toxin or bacteria creating the toxins. That's why they say throw out any...
That's not one of these things that you can cook at a high heat and it cooks it out. That's not what we're dealing with, right?
No. I've seen cases of people with botulism, usually it's babies. They end up being really...
what does that present as?
Their muscles all become floppy. They can have difficulty breathing. And then you can give them an antitoxin. You have to think about, like, we call that an index of suspicion in medicine. Like, you have to be thinking about this as a potential diagnosis, because it'd be strange for babies to eat, like, canned goods that had botulism in them. But again, maybe it's honey, maybe it's something else. So we'll often ask about questions like that. So I've seen that maybe 2 or 3 times in my career, a baby with botulism. It's a bit more unusual for adults to get. I've never seen an adult.
We just have immune systems that can combat it once it's in our...
Because again, you have to have a certain amount of the toxin for your body kind of area, you know what I mean? Your body surface area. So it's just unusual in those cases. But again, a little baby has less mass, and so that's a possibility. But it's extremely dangerous. 1 gram.
This is not like when you do tattoos in your garage because you're like, screw the system, man. We'll do our own tattoo. You don't do your own Botox.
Well, that's interesting. We'll talk about that. So it is very dangerous. Okay. If you have the purified crystalline form of the toxin, 1 gram could kill 1 million people.
Good Lord.
And a few kilograms could kill every human on the planet.
This is an incredible show that you're starting to write here. This is competing with The Last of Us over here.
So you need to have so the amounts used are so minuscule when we use it for medicinal purposes. So I'll talk about how it works in a second, but one thing I should let you know is when we say Botox, that's like a brand name. That's saying like Kleenex for tissue paper, okay? That's on a botulinum toxin A is Botox. That's a special type of botulinum toxin that's made for commercial use. And there's a whole bunch of different ones. There's probably like 6 or 7 different ones. So of course, the other manufacturers don't want you calling it all Botox because, but even
what do they want us to use?
We should say botulinum toxin because that's
Jesus Christ. That affects the entire industry negatively.
Because it's so long?
Who wants to say out loud? No, but you've got the word botulism almost there, and you've got the word toxin in there. Botox helps us not think about either of those things.
I don't know. Anyway, so Botox is a trademark name, but even when we're explaining it to families, if we're going to give them a Botox treatment, we just call it Botox.
So how exactly does it work? How is it injected or inserted into your body, and how does it not kill you?
Yeah. So again, we have to backtrack a bit how the toxin actually affects cells. So in our cells, we have neurotransmitters and neurotransmitters that can activate our muscles. Okay. So one of those is acetylcholine. So botulinum toxin prevents the release of acetylcholine from nerve cells. And so basically that prevents muscle contraction. So then you cannot move those muscles. And if it's affecting many nerves and if it's affecting many nerves that innervate many muscles, then you're going to get muscle paralysis. That's what I was saying. When a baby gets botulism, they have muscle paralysis. So that's what you're doing. So what someone thought, I'm not sure who did this, they said, okay, so if I inject minuscule amounts of this botulinum toxin, so that might work to relax certain muscles. And so that can help in certain medical uses. But even if the muscles on your face are relaxed a bit more, that's the cosmetic uses.
Now, what you're saying here, I would think that the muscles sagging and being so sort of relaxed is the problem, and you want to tighten up those muscles. Is that not what's happening?
Well, that's different kind of cosmetic surgery that you can do, but it's usually not the muscle sagging. That's more skin sagging.
The skin is sagging. Got it. That makes sense. Okay. So once this is injected into your skin, it relaxes the muscles.
That's right.
And what does that present as? What does that do for your face? Why is that a desirable thing to do? We're talking about we're talking about the cosmetic.
Yeah. So let's do the cosmetic first, then I'll talk to you about the actual medical uses. So yeah, and sometimes, by the way, it doesn't happen instantaneously. It can take about 2 weeks to take effect. It also, by the way, Ali, loses its effect. Usually we see over about 3 months. Could be longer, but usually about 3 months. So this is what you were getting at before when people are like, well, I'm on the
Botox train basically.
Yeah. It's actually more like a hamster wheel, right? Like it's constantly every 3 months you got to go back. So now you're in for a penny in for a pound. Like you're just going to have to keep doing this if you want the effects to last. So by injecting certain areas on the face, and not all of these are kind of, FDA approved, but wrinkles between the eyebrows, wrinkles around the eyes, like crow's feet, right? The creases in the forehead. Some people don't like the creases in their forehead.
No, yeah, I got plenty of those.
The lines at the corner of your mouth. And then there's something, the cobblestone skin on the chin. I don't even know what that looks like, but you and I often have facial hair, so maybe that's why. And so it's for these wrinkles. So you relax the muscles that are creating the wrinkles. You can smooth things out, basically. Now, there's different kinds of wrinkles. What I learned about researching this podcast, there's dynamic wrinkles, which you only see during muscle contraction. So right now, your forehead looks really good. Like I don't see any lines, but now if you exactly now you're like raising your eyebrows, so then you have those lines. I don't think it's a big deal. Some people don't like those, I guess. So those wrinkles that only appear with muscle movement, the contraction like that you just did, those will respond better than static wrinkles, which are there all the time, whether or not you're contracting the muscles of your face, which I think makes sense, right? Like, because it's muscle relaxation that you want. So that's basically how it works for those cosmetic indications. And by the way, just to answer a question, Ali, that you were asking me before about how much it's being used. First of all, these Botox injections are the most common cosmetic procedure done in the United States. If you look at data from about 10 years ago, 7 million people in 1 year in the United States had Botox treatments.
I wonder if that's gone up after the pandemic, or people go, this doesn't matter anymore.
Or is it the opposite, where life is short, I'd rather spend the money on Botox? I don't know.
I wonder. Given that this is a medical portion of a podcast devoted to medicine here, should we talk about the medical uses, which I wouldn't even know what those are.
Right. So I'll talk first about the ones that I use the most, or my colleagues in child neurology use, then we can talk about some other ones too. So migraine is one of the big ones. So if you have chronic migraines, so very frequent migraines, or some people have migraines that are there all the time. They're not episodic. They happen all the time. And we have an episode on migraine in the archives you can check out. You can get Botox injections. Again, you need them every 3 months or so, but there is scientific evidence that they work. The evidence is more in adults versus kids, but we do it in kids. Some patients find it really helps. Now, why relaxing the muscles would help with migraine is very unusual, because tension type headaches is when, you've had a long day at work, you feel this tightness in your head, you take a couple Advil or Tylenol. That's a tension type headache. That's muscle tension. So that makes sense. But a migraine has nothing to do with muscle tension. A migraine has to do with some abnormalities in neurotransmitters that are affecting your blood vessels in your brain. So why Botox works for that, I don't think it's been very clear. Even when people try to explain it to me, I don't quite get it. But it does work for migraine.
For some people.
Another thing that we use it for is spasticity. So we can have patients, let's say with cerebral palsy, it would be the most common reason in kids, who have tightness of their muscles. So you've seen people with maybe cerebral palsy who've had a stroke, who their arm is, say, flexed, you know?
Yeah.
And
Or
their hand is
the
turned in. Yeah,
hand's curled
Ali
up,
is like
sure.
flexing his wrist and kind of posturing his hand. So how do you relax that? They have, because of their brain injury, they're having abnormal activation of certain muscles. And so you want to relax certain muscles to allow function. So you can give those patients botulinum toxin. And that can enhance range of motion and can help. Sometimes it helps if it's particularly painful. So we do that. It depends where you go, how that's done. Sometimes they do it without sedation, and sometimes they kind of sedate the kids and do it. So sometimes you have to inject a lot of different spots. And I didn't get into this before, but usually use a very, very small needle. We often, like, smaller than what you get if you're getting your blood drawn, or smaller than if you're getting an immunization, like much smaller than that. So it doesn't hurt terribly much. It hurts like if you've ever gotten freezing at the dentist, it will hurt like a little bit like that, but probably a bit less. But sometimes you have to get multiple sites injected. So in a little kid, we'd maybe put them to sleep, but adults who get it for migraine, they don't put you to sleep give you any freezing. They just inject it.
What else is it used for?
So one of the things it's used for in adults, they can have cervical dystonia. So cervical dystonia is like you have posturing of your neck to a certain way, to a certain side. It's a movement disorder. Botulinum toxin is the first line treatment for that. Some patients can also get other abnormal movements like blepharospasm, which is kind of like a closing of your eye, or people have crossed eyes, which is called strabismus. You can use it for that. It can be used for abnormal excessive sweating in your armpits. That's called primary axillary hyperhidrosis. Yeah, so it can be used for that. This is people who like drench their shirt several times a day. You know, it's not just, I get a little bit, if I forgot to put deodorant on or antiperspirant on, I get, no, it's like.
And how would something that relaxes your muscles help with hyperhidrosis?
That's very interesting. So it also affects the sweat glands as well, not just the skeletal muscles. It can be used in other areas as well. So, because again, it impairs this acetylcholine release. So it can impair the release from other cells as well. So it's actually used in bladder dysfunction sometimes. If you have problems with like an overactive bladder, mainly in adults, it can be used for that. Yeah, so it has some other uses that we don't always think about. So again, nobody ever thought about sweating or their bladder. Like when I talk about the muscle for spasticity in the patients with CP or the dystonia, okay, that makes sense. Muscles, you know what I mean? But some of the other things like the migraine, the sweating, the bladder dysfunction, a bit.
I'll just put this out there. When you and I go out, you pee 3 times for every 1 time I pee. So if you want me to accompany you to a bladder Botox treatment,
thank you.
I would do that.
Yeah, I have an infamously small bladder. Now everybody knows that. Okay, great. Maybe I need the Botox.
I said 3 to 1. I used a ratio. To use the words infamously small is really putting yourself at legendary status there, which I wasn't trying to do that.
My wife and at least one of my daughters, they can do a 7-hour plane ride, never go to the bathroom.
That's something.
Yeah. So that car rides, they never want to stop. And I'm like, oh, we're going to stop again.
We'll stop for the kids. Yeah. The kids, the kids need to stop.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. We haven't talked about risks or side effects yet. I assume there are some to be aware of with something that is deadly enough to kill millions.
Yeah, usually it's just like bruising or swelling where they do the injections. Sometimes, like if it's too much around your face, you can get your eyebrows sagging or your eyelids sagging, right? That's kind of what you were getting at, right? Like, okay, you're giving too much, so now you're getting too much muscle weakness. So that, and cosmetically that would look bad, but that will go away in a little bit. So that's,
well, I mean, I wasn't thinking about that specifically, but I definitely was talking about, famously Joan Rivers' face looked nothing like what it originally looked like
in surgery, though. That wouldn't be
plastic surgery. Yeah. Okay, got it. Okay.
So there is something. They have this warning that can occur that they say sometimes the botulinum toxin, even though you inject it in one spot, can kind of travel and affect other areas. And of course, the biggest concern would be that it would affect all your muscles and make you weak. But particularly if it affects your swallowing or breathing. So you always warn people that this could occur, like you could have breathing difficulties, then you have to go to or swallowing difficulties, so you have to go to the hospital immediately. So there have been reports of this, very rare. There's even been reports of death after botulinum toxin injection, so you have to warn people about it. And the symptoms are actually more likely to occur in the children who are receiving for the spasticity and something like cerebral palsy. So you have to warn people about that, maybe monitor them afterwards to make sure, like in the hospital for several hours, just to make sure everything is okay. So again, it's very uncommon, but it is a theoretical possibility.
So let's talk about the cost of this and what part of it is covered. I imagine the non-cosmetic parts.
Yeah.
That's probably covered by your provider.
Yeah, the medical stuff is covered. Most of those things, the migraine is not usually covered in kids because there's not a lot of scientific evidence in under 18. Again, we still use, and sometimes people will just pay out of pocket or their insurance company will cover it. But yeah, in general, the cosmetic approaches are not covered. So you have to pay out of the pocket. I don't know how much they cost, so I have to look it up. This is from laserbodymd.ca, which is a place that you can go to get Botox.
Are we sponsored by Laserbody?
No, I'd like to be. No, I wouldn't. So it depends about how much. So dose Botox in units, okay? So, and you do the cost per unit, and certain cosmetic procedures require more or less units. So the less would be like chin dimples, which would be like 6 units maybe. The lower eyelid would be like 2 units. But some things will cost a lot more units. So crow's feet can be up to 24 units, for example. So let's say for these cosmetic procedures, it could be as little as $50 and as much as like $1,000 for necklines. I guess necklines can use a lot of units. So, and that's just, remember, that's for the one-time application.
Right.
Then you need to go back at least usually about 4 times a year, they'd estimate. Ali's looking at his necklines right now.
Yeah. Well, neck is a crazy thing because, people spend a lifetime putting creams and all these kind of things on their face, and then they forget their neck until it's sometimes too late. And next thing you know, you've got the neck of a rooster and you're, approaching 50 and you're like, I think I missed a spot, my entire neck.
That's when you just move to lots of scarves.
Yeah. Scarf life.
So that's our episode for today. Let us know what you guys thought. Very curious if you end up watching The Substance, what you thought about it. Hopefully we didn't mislead you and make you watch a movie you didn't feel comfortable watching, but very curious about that. And then in a few weeks, the Oscars will have occurred, so we'll see what happens with The Substance. And that, let us know. drvcomedian@gmail.com, Dr. V Comedian on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. We are everywhere. Hopefully you're enjoying our clips that we've been putting out as well. Some traction with those as well. So let us know what you guys think about those. Ali, what you got going on for March?
March is very Canada Reads focused. Literary debate here in Canada, televised on radio, on the web. And it is March 17th to the 20th. So I'll be knee deep in books and reading and
All right. Excellent. But before you go, don't forget to wear a scarf around your neck. Scarf life.
Scarf life.
And also remember that although I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor. Medical issues we talk about for your interest and information only, and they're not medical advice. Please consult your medical professionals for actual medical advice. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.